I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. Bill, well, a Texas judge has ruled that Obamacare is unconstitutional. It's a rather complicated concept behind the case, but I'll briefly summarize it and apologize in advance to any legal scholars in our audience. But the questions I have for you really aren't related directly to legal questions. So basically what the judge said was that the Supreme Court of the United States has essentially blessed the mandate under Obamacare, the individual mandate, as a tax. And Congress is allowed to tax, so therefore Obamacare is constitutional. But then Congress repealed the penalty for noncompliance, and the judge is arguing the mandate, as it was previously argued, is not severable from the rest of the bill, meaning without any portion of it, or that particular portion of it, that the whole bill collapses under its weight. Now, there's some dispute among legal scholars about whether that's the case or not, and certainly this is going to escalate and be heard at higher court levels. But, Bill, I thought it was an interesting situation because what it basically says politically is that Republicans are back in the fight over Obamacare. But my first question for you, Bill, is it a fight worth having at this point?
It's the fight. It's the fight only, well, for a number of reasons. It's the fight because it's been the fight since this thing was rammed down our throats almost 10 years ago now. And it's the fight because of all of the encroachment on the state upon our lives. The one we want the least is the state determining who gets to live or who dies based on scarce resources. And that's clearly what happens in England in some cases. And in fact, in England, you can have somebody who the state has determined doesn't have a future. And then if you say, I've raised private money to treat this person at least 2 times, they won't let them out of the building. They're going to lock them in the NHS hospital to make sure they die on schedule.
Well, Bill, I think the critics could easily say to you, based on that argument, hey, Obamacare has been in place for a while now, and even though conservatives have been wailing about the possibility of becoming the next England or even Canada, we haven't seen this materialize, so where's your argument?
Well, my argument's in a number of places. The first of my arguments is that this overturning, or at least this challenge to Obamacare as a result of the mandate, should not have been done by a Texas judge, should have been done by the Supreme Court when they heard it a couple years ago. John Roberts said that it's constitutional because it's a tax. Well, it wasn't sold as a tax. If it had been sold as a tax, it would have failed. So the whole implementation of it was fraudulent as far as I'm concerned. Once he said that this mandate is not a mandate, it's a tax, as far as I'm concerned, okay, now you need to send this back and send us some legislation where you talk about the Obamacare tax. That's number one. Number two, everybody's seen their rates triple. Everybody's seen their coverage get worse. Everybody's seen the doctors that they were going to keep if they liked. They're all gone. All of this stuff was a giant lie. But the worst of it is that medical care in this country is rapidly degrading because not just of Obamacare, but because of this really warped, bizarre, unholy kind of iron triangle we have between the hospitals, the insurance companies, and the government. And if anybody has been to a doctor recently, at least in a relatively high-density metropolitan area, you know that a doctor's visit now is about a 4-minute deal where the doctor comes in, asks you if you're dying, you point to where it hurts, they say, we'll run these tests, then somebody else takes a tube of your blood, and you get an email telling you that you're actually within the error bars and apparently still alive. And that's what it's become. It's become this because doctors now have to do 3 times the amount of work that they did before because they have 3 times of the cost that they have to pay. They have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in malpractice insurance before they even get out the door. And then they have to pay 1 or 2 or 5 staff members to deal with not only the insurance regulations, but the government regulations. And the whole thing is a bloody mess.
A lot of what you're saying here, Bill, pre-existed Obamacare, but there's
absolutely.
I don't think that everyone was harmed by Obamacare. And the reason why I say that is because there were hundreds of thousands of people. I just heard, I think, the governor of Kentucky on the radio on my way home today, and that said some 500,000 people were covered thanks to the Medicare expansion contained in Obamacare. You've got all those people. You've got a lot of people around the country who are glad that there's no more limitations on pre-existing conditions and you can get insurance even if you've got a pre-existing condition. You've got a lot more people far more people who are delighted that they can keep their kids on their insurance until they're 26 years old, and a lot of less than 26-year-olds who are even happier about that. So I'm not really asking you a legal question here or even a practical question. I'm asking a political question. Does it make sense to fight this fight against something that has become so woven into the warp and woof of the American economy that we run the risk of looking like the bad guys trying to kill something that's helping, Uncle Jake stay on the lung machine?
Well, once again, we're incapable of providing anybody on any national level who knows how to how to advance the message. But you started your preposition by saying not that many people were harmed by Obamacare, and that's just flat out wrong. Anybody who had their rates significantly increased was harmed by Obamacare. People who had their rates tripled, quadrupled, those people had their lives impacted adversely by Obamacare. You don't have to be killed by a program for the program to ruin your life. The number of requirements that it put on businesses and the onus that it provided to them, all of this stuff. I happen to agree with the pre-existing condition aspect of it, but the pre-existing condition aspect of it would take care of itself, as would every single other aspect of this, Scott, if this was simply left to the market the way that my car insurance is left to the market. The Democrats apparently think that my car can make a better decision than I can. I have 3 choices for my insurance for myself. My car has 500, and I can decide who I want to buy it from, how much I want to pay, how much coverage I want. I can decide all of this stuff for my car. I guess the Democrats care more about cars than they do for people.
I think there's a much more personal aspect to this, though, because, worst case scenario, if your car insurance doesn't go right, nobody dies. And so I think there's people naturally have a fear of the unknown, and now that Obamacare is sort of the status quo, and Republicans, this is really, you were getting at the heart of this. Republicans have been saying repeal and replace for years, and I don't know yet what Republicans mean by replace.
Yeah, that's it exactly. It makes people happy that their children can stay on their insurance program until they're 48 or 65 or retirement age or whatever, but that means that program is being paid for by somebody. And ultimately, Scott, we got 2 things here that are really, really big. One of them is that we live in the age where money doesn't matter anymore. I think somewhere in the last 8 or 10 years, we realized that this debt was not going to get paid off. And so, since people have had this sort of tacit understanding that $20 trillion, more than that now probably, but $20 trillion of IOUs in a bank someplace, that money's never going to be repaid. Never. There's never, ever, ever a foreseeable future in America where the government is running enough of a surplus every year to pay off a $20 trillion debt. Not going to happen. So, since that's not going to happen, people are spending money that they don't have on things like this because it buys them votes. I am more opposed to the Obamacare program simply because I think all government health care is appalling. This whole thing has to be undone. Now, if you're saying that undoing Obamacare and just going back to a world that was like the world before and then came Obamacare, but now no Obamacare, that's not a solution. You're not going to get a solution to this problem, Scott, until you understand why a 2-cent aspirin pill, 1 tablet, is billed for $20 on your insurance. Until you get down to the reason why a 2-cent bare aspirin, if you buy them at Walmart in if you buy them in 100 tablet barrel, they come out up to about 2 cents per pill. You look at your insurance and you got an aspirin at the doctor's office, $20. So that's a 1,000% increase. That's an enormous inflation, and it's representative of everything else that happens in the system, because the whole thing is absolutely unbelievably complex when it doesn't have to be. And just so you know, I mean, the numbers work something like this. For every dollar that gets taken out of my wallet in taxes for Obamacare, 33 cents goes to, well, first of all, they take it and it goes to Washington. Washington takes 33 cents out of that dollar. to fund the standing army of bureaucrats that administer this nightmare. Then that money gets sent over to the insurance companies, and they take also about 33 cents, 32 cents of that dollar for their own administrative costs, and about 34 cents of every dollar actually shows up at the doctor's office. Now he has to spend money to deal with the insurance companies, staff members to deal with the government and Medicare and all the rest of it. And I'm saying, why don't we just give the dollar to the doctor? Why don't we just do that? How hard is it? It wasn't hard before. What's so hard about it now?
I just had a doctor's appointment last week, as I believe you did as well, and I had to sign up as a new patient at this medical care practice. And one of the things I noticed is it said, if you want to pay cash, you don't have insurance and you want to pay cash, we'll take 30% right off the top. We will chop your bill by 30%. However, if you have insurance, you may not pay us cash. You must file it with your insurance company.
I think that the discount is potentially much greater than that. The only number I know for a fact from a memory in a study was somebody took a look at what carpal tunnel surgery would be, and their insurance estimate was something like $22,000, and then they asked one of these local hospitals if they would do it for cash, and the amount was $2,700. It was.
And you've previously given the example of LASIK surgery, which now in effect you pull up at a drive-through and stick your head into a kiosk, and they do it, and you swipe your credit card.
That's right. What color eye do you want? Hazel.
So
do you say? Yeah, so exactly. It's like you're at the point now where you have drive-up LASIK.
So let's play out the scenario, though, politically, Bill. Here's what happens,
sure.
Okay? A lot of conservatives are doing a little end zone dance now because a Texas judge has ruled Obamacare unconstitutional. We knew it all along. And here's what happens. It works its way up through the court system. It gets to the Supreme Court. Roberts and Kavanaugh are probably still going to stick with the Democrats and say, yeah, this was okay. We're going to grandfather this in under the previous reasoning. Let's say Congress tries to do something about it. Do you really think that the Republicans have enough votes to go in there and sort of and essentially get rid of it themselves? No. And so what we have a bunch of Republicans and a bunch of conservatives putting on another chest-thumping show that results in nothing but Obamacare continuing ad infinitum. Where am I wrong?
Well, you're not wrong anywhere, sad to say. And, when Donald Trump was elected and we had the House, the Senate, and the presidency, the repeal of Obamacare was number one on the list, that or the wall, neither one of which happened. And what we found was that a number of Republicans, most of them probably, who'd been swearing to God on a holy Bible that they would repeal Obamacare the second they had a president who would sign it. My gosh, they'd be happy to repeal it. Well, it turns out that they did get a president who would have signed it, and these Republican lawmakers decided that they didn't want to take the political heat, so it didn't pass. And the repeal didn't pass. And a lot of that, of course, is due to the maverick, who I will never, ever forget the expression on John McCain's face as this little, cat that ate the canary smile as he walked in with the deciding vote for the future of healthcare in this country. And of course, John McCain, sided with the progressives on this one. So I said there were two big issues. One of them is that this entire medical insurance thing is an absolute mess and it has to go. And the answer is you replace it with the market. You replace it with the market. What's so hard about this? You replace it with the market. Somebody's going to be offering you something for a price, and then somebody else is going to want your business. They're going to offer you about the same thing for maybe a slightly lower price. I get to decide, hooray. But the other, and we talked about this being connected to the idea that the money doesn't really exist anymore. It's just a number that doesn't mean anything. It's like this kind of ethereal sort of golden calf. We don't even worship really it. It just kind of floats in the air over our heads and provides this sort of manna of benefits to everybody until it doesn't. But the other thing that we haven't talked about that is also critically important here is that it's not just that we don't believe in money anymore. We also don't believe in the rule of law anymore. And obviously, I think that the way that Obamacare was pushed through the Senate and the Congress and the House, you could argue that it, by the slimmest of constitutional means, it did get through. But as I said, when the Supreme Court decided not to deal with it, that's one thing. But here's what I'm really talking about in this case, Scott. We can remember from our days of fighting this back when it was passed in the early 10, 11, somewhere in there. We remember that Obamacare was set to go into effect on this date. Let's just say April 1st, because that's a great date for Obamacare to go into effect. And as it turned out, Obamacare wasn't ready, or for whatever reason. You remember the website that didn't work? They couldn't put a shopping cart together. They spent, was it $900 million on a website that they couldn't get the shopping cart to work? They could have come, I can do a website where the shopping cart doesn't work for a lot less money than that. But what happened then is indicative of what the real actual crisis in this country is. And what happened then was President Obama said, we're going to delay this for 6 months. What's that? We're going to delay it. We're going to roll it out. Instead of rolling it out in April, we're going to roll it out in October. Well, where's your legislation to change the rollout date? I don't need legislation. I'm just telling you, we're going to roll it out in October. Well, the legislation came with a start date, and it came with all of these other things that came with it. Yeah, I know we had to pass it so we could find out what's in it, but once we found out what was in it, we found out that there was a start date and other things. And then the president simply dictated changes to this law, and we just took it. He didn't get these changes amended to the law. He didn't get these changes legally passed so that the law was modified. He just simply threw down the giant fiat that he carries around in the halo over his head there, and threw it down and said, we're going to push it back. Well, you know, when there are laws that say you have to turn in all your emails or else you go to jail, and there are laws that say that Congress can create laws but the president can't, otherwise it's a dictatorship, and when all of this stuff doesn't matter anymore, you're left where we are now, where half of the country is just doesn't care. They just want their free stuff. And the other half of the country, our half of the country, is in a state of kind of emotional free fall where we wonder. Personally, I don't see the rule of law returning to Washington. We start to have to ask ourselves, are we capable of governing half of the country amongst ourselves according to the rule of law? That's really how it looks to me at this point. You know, they just do whatever the hell they want to. And they do it because the press covers for them. And mainly they do it because we let them do it.
Ladies and gentlemen, 5 days a week, Bill Whittle brings his incisive analysis to the news of the day. And we appreciate those people at BillWhittle.com who are members there who have made it possible. I haven't mentioned this in a while, but you know, we are on YouTube. In fact, you're probably watching us right there on YouTube. There is a little subscribe button on YouTube, and you can click that subscribe button and make sure that you get notified when we post a new video to YouTube. Our audience has been steadily growing there, and we are grateful for the people who watch us on YouTube as well. Very lively comment section down there, and for the sake of, that's
Liberty
right,
Bell?
the little Liberty Bell notification button. I like that. I actually do read the comments on YouTube, and just to spare other members of the organization from having to do so, and being able to keep a shred of dignity. But we are grateful for the people who engage in that, and we just want to thank everybody who has participated in this adventure and continues to fund it, support it, and share it. So for Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this possible.